Arthur Smith is staying put by every reasonable accounting, and so is everyone else. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Smith did not get the job in East Rutherford. He did not get the job in Chicago before that. He is not, one can safely presume, going anywhere. And I can say that based on having a pretty good feel from the inside that there wasn't any outward dissatisfaction with his work. And if that had been the only thing that would stay status quo, I'd be okay with it. But guess what? Not a thing has changed. Not one person, and not to our knowledge, one role. And while I'm not remotely surprised by that, and I can't imagine that anybody else would be either, I do feel that it's fair to bring up that this isn't good. Optics are one thing. The optics of this are terrible. You have a collapse like the Steelers just had, and you have such a visible percentage of it being something that you can hang on coaching in general or a coach here or there, and you do nothing. And the longer it goes on, and I'm starting to think that they're already past that point, where you should make such decisions quickly so that those people can have a greater opportunity to get jobs elsewhere. Yeah, the longer the reality sets in. I don't want to run through some kind of list here of people who I think should be fired, because I cover the team, I talk to people with the team, but I'm not on the literal inside. I'm not in the meeting rooms. I'm not going to be privy to who's doing a good job of, say, really specific teaching of a certain player or administering accountability or the other things that coaches from positional coaches on upward have as part of their responsibilities. But I do know that it couldn't have been perfect. I do know that it could not have been some spotless record on everyone's count, because we're talking in week 17 and week 18 about miscommunication on defense, because we're talking about in week 17, week 18, and the playoff week, and all of the other weeks for that matter, the offensive line not getting better. And there isn't somebody on this big planet who's more capable of improving young offensive linemen, teaching them the very, very, very specific skills that they need to excel in the NFL. You can go and draft a Broderick Jones, and he can have all the brute strength and size and everything else, and it doesn't matter if he doesn't know what he's doing. And if he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's not dumb, he's definitely not dumb, then that reflects pretty poorly on Pat Meyer and everyone associated with coaching the offensive line. But I guess that's also, all aces, A+, right down the line. We can praise Zach Azzanni. Here's another one. For what a tough dude he appeared to be in training camp, in standing up to George Pickens' nonsense and going chin to chin with him when it called for it. But how is it that over the course of a full regular season and one playoff game, these wide receivers never got open? Is that on the positional coach? Is that on Smith? I don't know. You know what I do know? Whatever went into it sure wasn't worth preserving in its precise form. Now, is Azzanni actually the greatest wide receivers coach in the universe, and he just ran into a coordinator who can't scheme people open? I don't have that answer. The only answer that I do have is that what they actually put onto the field as a product was nowhere near good enough and not worth keeping exactly the same. Carl Dunbar is on an expiring contract. He's a defensive line coach who's worked for years with Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, because TJ aligns with those guys, and he's obviously gotten great results out of those individuals and others. Was he even a part of the reason that the Ravens trampled the Steelers for 299 yards all on the ground? I find that a little bit hard to believe, but I'm open to listening. I'm open to anything that doesn't sound like a closed case. I'm open to anything that doesn't look like, hey, Art said Mike can stay. We're all staying. I'm open to anything that isn't an outward lack of accountability from the very top to the very bottom of this team's non-player structure. But yeah, the one that really leaps out, and it might not even be his fault, is Terrell Austin, because that was one really awful defensive design against the Ravens, and far, 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 far worse was that once it was clear that the Ravens had seen right through it and were plowing right through it, there wasn't an adjustment made until near the end of the third bleeping quarter. It's a Tomlin defense. It's Tomlin's responsibility. It's Tomlin's call even into the headset when it comes to something like this. Or at the very, very least, do it at halftime, you know? But I thought Austin set up as the classic, yeah, we'll get rid of him and replace him with someone else who will listen to everything that Tomlin says. Nope. Nothing at all internally, and as a result, they won't open themselves up to new potential people externally, new potential ideas externally, because they're the Steelers. And what matters most is just showing everybody that your way is the right way. My goodness, I swear I did not think this would be a subject this far out from the end of the season. I really didn't. When we come back, J1Q. This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Today's J1Q comes from Dylan. He says, DK, what if the Steelers haven't fired Terrell Austin because they value his work ethic and mind for the game, but are feeling out the market behind the scenes and would keep Austin on in a lesser position? Am I crazy? Has anyone ever been demoted like that and stayed with a team? The answer to the last question is, yeah, that does happen. It's not common. Most coaches will react poorly to a demotion like that, and then you risk kind of poisoning the well a little bit. You don't want to have a malcontent in your ranks, even if they were to enthusiastically appeal for some sort of demotion just to make sure that they continue to be employed. Now, that said, what's a lesser position? Dylan, what do you see as a lesser position than someone who has the label of defensive coordinator who isn't actually the defensive coordinator? He's the facilitator, and he's the one that's, in fairness to TA, from the booth, he is calling things. That's not happening from the sideline. That's not Tomlin doing that. He is the game day guy making the calls. But if you're Tomlin and you want it this way, or you insist on it being this way, and you even had it this way when the legendary Dick LeBeau was there in his final few years, and you had it this way all through Keith Butler's tenure, what would make anybody think that the person he'd bring in to replace TA with that title would be any different? I occasionally will still hear people bemoan Brian Flores not having been retained. Flores was right here. He was right under their roof. And then he goes to Minneapolis, becomes the Vikings DC, and look at that Minnesota defense. Okay, look at that Minnesota defense. Look at the style that they play. Look at their schematics. Heck, look at their personnel and the way they're designed to fit all of those X's and O's, and you will find almost no commonality with the Tomlin Steelers. So in the event that Flores had been retained, let's just say that Art Rooney really one-upped Tomlin on this one, kind of the way he did a few years ago with the big controversial offensive coordinator shuffle. Then Rooney would have had to tell both Flores and Tomlin, that guy over there, he's your coordinator now. Let him coordinate. You just be the head coach. You think that would have worked? Does anybody think that would have worked? Understand, please, that when I called for Tomlin to get fired, or whatever method would be required of not having him be the head coach anymore, whether that's a trade or whatever, when I did that, a big part of my influence for that was all of this sort of thing. They can't change, they can't advance, and they certainly can't do things like having him coexist with a defensive coordinator who doesn't have anything in common with him or what he's done in the NFL or how he's approached it for the better part of 2 decades now. And that, to me, is what makes this all just so regrettable. Once more, with gusto, there will be no change. Even if 1 or 2 names end up popping up over the next couple of days, guys that might be pushed out, strength and conditioning coordinator, athletic trainer, nothing's going to change. Nothing. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. We'll do another one of these tomorrow.